Hello everyone, my name is Raul Perez. I'm a senior art student here at NSU, and I'm here to discuss UV unwrapping in Blender. So UV unwrapping or mapping is pretty much like the next logical step once you have a 3D model ready. And the process pretty much is you're overlaying a two-dimensional image onto like a three-dimensional like object or surface. Um, and what UV actually stands for is doesn't really the letters U and V don't actually really stand for anything. They mostly just they replace X and Y in terms of a coordinate system. So usually when you want to denote a specific location, you use X and Y coordinates. Well, in Blender, you use U and V coordinates, and that's kind of what UV mapping means. It'll be more clear when I get into it. But I'm going to do first a simple project, just so you guys get the premise of like what's going on, and then I'm using a little bit more complicated to see like another hiccup they might run into when you're working with UV wrapping that might result in you having to do one or two extra steps just to get the result that you want. Alright, so just to give you guys a quick walkthrough on how to do a simple like UV mapping. I'm just going to use a default cube here in Blender that would allow me to demonstrate what's like pretty much going on. So first, I think it's important to define and enter the proper workspace, because right now we're like in the layout, which is like the general default workspace you load into, but they have a UV editing workspace. So when you click into it, you can see now that I have like two mirror or panels on my screen. The left one is kind of like the texture preview in a way. You can see like the layout of this box with all like the lines and the faces on it. And on the right side, we can get kind of like a live preview. Now, obviously, well, not obviously, but if I put in textures right now, you would only get this default gray. And in order to change that, if we just scroll in this very top bar here, this menu is the viewport shading. And if we just activate texture, whenever we do something here on the left side, it's going to start showing up here on the right side. And so first, to set this up, I'm going to select everything with A. And then I'm going to go into this little icon here, which is the materials tab. And this already has a material, but they just create a new one from scratch. So I'll create a new one, which is going to rename it to like the cube test. And from here, we have all these different parameters where if you click this, you can change like the color of the cube if you want. But that's not what we're doing. We're interested in applying a image-based texture onto our cube. So if we click this yellow dot here, actually, we get this whole drop-down menu with texture, and the textures here are already like pre-made stuff that comes in with Blender. But if you want just a bit more personalized, then you want to do image texture. So we get a few more options here, and like I could just open it right away, but something that can help you visualize this whole process more. If we go to this new like little area here with new image, and under generated type, if I change it to a UV grid. And now I'm just going to call this again cube test, and then make the new image here on the right side. If I zoom out, it might be kind of hard to see, but if I click into like different points here, you can this here you can see I still have the layout of the box, but I've overlaid this whole like checkerboard pattern with like different colors and like the little plus and minus symbols. And you can see here that it's being live like updated to like our preview here with our model. So you can see how like you manipulating the pattern here on the UV like map will affect the model. But right now this doesn't really help us. This just help to visualize like how the grid overlays on this cube. So here back in the materials panel, in this little like folder icon, this is how you import your image. So for example, I'm gonna get a texture that I just got online, this metal crate texture, and I open it. You can see that now it's been applied to this. Hold on, let me select this first and then do the same thing really quick. Metal crate texture. Okay, this is what I wanted. So now you see here on the left side that we have our texture with our layout there, and obviously it's updated live. But if you're not happy with how the pattern is fitting on top of this cube, if you have the cube selected, and with these tools to the very left, you can move around this layout to adjust how it looks on the model. So if I move the layout like up, you can see how the texture is scrolling on the cube. So this is kind of how you like find, like manipulate and pick point, like, or like point out and make any small modifications. So I moved it. I can also rotate it if I want it to be not like square or whatever. I can also like scale it, see I'm fitting more at once, I'm fitting less at once. And again, this process is rather simple because we're working with the default cube that Blender gives us. Working with a more complicated model, there's maybe like one or two pitfalls you might fall victim to. But to fix those are just a matter of like one or two extra steps. But this is like the very bare bones basic like understanding. So for example, if you want to make crates in a video game, you can make or find your own like wooden crate texture and just do what I did here and adjusting it so that it will work just fine with your layout. So in the previous example, we used the default cube that Blender provides, and we had almost very little issue pretty much applying this like 2D texture onto this cube. But here this time I have a cylindrical object, kind of like a vase kind of model that I just made really quickly. And when we try to apply it, there's going to be a few extra hurdles that we have to jump through. So once again, I have like my workspace set up, how I had it previously. So I made a new material here called vase test. So I try to add that image texture, I get this drop down, and then I'm going to add the UV grid, call it vase test as well. New image. Oh, I didn't select it. My bad. But yeah, okay. So now you see I have the grid here, and even though I have the grid here on the left side, on the left panel, it's not showing up. And if I try to like select everything again, I press U on the keyboard, and you see this UV mapping like system. And if I try to make it to unwrap, just like randomly angle based, I get a little warning here saying unwrap failed to solve 101 islands, edge may be needed or seams, and that's kind of what we need to address right now. To kind of like give you like a metaphor in a way, it's like when you're trying to unwrap a cylinder, where if you do that, you end up with two squares and a rectangle. And so we kind of have to do the same thing with this vase. And so I'm gonna select an edge here. So with the edge selection, I'm gonna hold down Alt and click on this very top edge. You see I selected it. Then I'm gonna go down to the bottom, Alt Shift, and then I'm gonna select the bottom edge. And you see that I have both edges selected. So now I'm gonna press U, and I'm gonna put Mark Seam. And you can see that it's now highlighted in red. So let's look at the two cylinders that we need for our like cylinder like layout, but we need a seam going like vertically. So I'm going to select with Alt this vertical edge loop pretty much, and same thing, I'm going to press U, mark seam, and so now I have pretty much like a perfect cylinder layout organized. And so now if I do U and I do angle based, U angle based. Okay, cool. So now if we look at here in the preview, you see that the textures kind of get like warped a bit, and it's not looking like the best in some of the areas around here. I mean, it doesn't look too bad, but if in your case it doesn't look amazing, then what you could do is press everything with A, press U, and you can try on different unwrap options. So like here I do minimum stretch. I mean, it does a bit of a better job. You see how like here it's no longer like parallel to the rest. So you pretty much kind of have to play around with it until you get a result you're happy with, which I think the best one was just angle based, since the boxes here look pretty straight on for the most part. Of course, if I select everything and you look at the left side, you can see that Blender automatically kind of like broke my entire geometry down into these two like circles and then all of these little boxes. And so with this, now I should be able to import my metal grate texture I'm going to reuse for this one. And you can see that it applied it pretty well onto my surface. And of course, if I select it and I zoom in here, I could, move around like the mesh to like move the texture. on the model. But yeah, those are like the few extra steps you need to add in. Just the seams at the top and bottom, and one here on the side. Some other patterns or some other geometries. The pattern, the UV grid will be warped, distorted. So again, just like A, U, and just keep trying these different UV mapping options, and eventually one of them will kind of work for you. They'll kind of like adjust and compensate for the distortion of the pattern. So just to take like a quick peek at like the end of like this project, pretty much, I'm gonna go back to object mode with this selected. I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna do shade smooth, and yeah, Blender automatically smooth it out. And you know, again, this is very rudimentary, but this technique applies to like any model or sculpture you make. So it's pretty handy to know. Of course, if you want to make like, for example, a character model and you want to do texture painting, you can always take the texture into Photoshop. Like you have your model, you unwrap the UV map, and then you take that UV map with all of like the grid outlines, like I had it here in edit mode, like this, to the left, and then you can kind of use that as a guide to create the textures you want in whatever like Photoshop or Procreate, and then export it into Blender as like a JPEG in order to wrap this texture onto your model. Another thing to note when you're using cylindrical forms like this is that, remember those seams that we made? The texture will kind of be like cut at those seams. You see here like the circular seam, the pattern kind of gets disrupted. Same with like the vertical seam that we made here. Which now, if you're doing like models for like characters, for example, maybe you could be smart to hide those seams in places that they're not going to be seen normally by like your players or your animation or whatever. Otherwise, you want to try to make it seamless. You're going to have to play around with the texture itself in order to make it line up, kind of with like Photoshop, with like patterns that you can save and stuff like that. I mean, overall, this has been like the basics for UV unwrapping, a quick introduction. Of course, it's a lot more in depth if you try to jump into it. But there's plenty of videos online to help you get further into like the woods of this. But the goal of this video is to give you guys like a quick jump start, an introduction to the idea, so that if this catches your attention, you can more easily get started and pursue this venture. But pretty much that ends my demonstration for today. And I hope that you guys at least learned a bit about this, and I will see you guys in the next video.